All right, everyone. Welcome to this session. I hope you all can see and hear me. We are live with our 2 p.m. session for Never Tell Me the Odds: How to Stand Out in a Crowded Field, based on 50,000 MLH fellowship resumes. Thank you so much for coming. I see you all in chat. I welcome. I recognize some screen names here. Some of you are brand new to me. I can't wait to get to know you all over the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. For those of you who already know me, hi, nice to meet you. For those of you who don't know me, let me very quickly introduce myself. So that's me. Right there. I'm Amanda. Couple of fun facts to know about me. So I'm talking to you today as the director of our fellowship program. The all aspects of the MLH fellowship, from admissions to program delivery to um, fellow outcomes to alumni management, all of those things ultimately roll up to me. A few fun facts about me if we're going to be spending the next hour together. I'm a graduate of NYU. I got my master's degree at NYU, and before I worked at MLH, I worked in a lot of places, but most recently I worked for the Coding Bootcamp Flatiron School for like 5 or 6 years. So I have a lot of experience in the sort of early career developer space, helping people get into technology. Other than that, a few fun things about me. I am a lifelong New Yorker, born and raised. Love the city. I'll never leave it, no matter how expensive it gets, I swear. Love it so much. Um, in addition to being a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, I am absolutely 100% a crazy cat mom. I love my pets. I have two. As you can see up here, there's my one cat. His name is Navi, named after the character in Ocarina of Time for my gamers out there. And in that picture, he is cuddling up onto a blanket that says "Open source makes me warm and fuzzy." So there he is, warm and fuzzy on a warm and fuzzy blanket. And last but not least, speaking of video games, I am old enough, and this is frightening. I am old enough that my first video game system, the one I cut my video game teeth on, was the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I will leave it all to you and your Googling skills to figure out what that means and when that software hit the market. So y'all can figure that out on your own. But what that says is I've been around tech and in this world for a very, very long time. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the fellowship. Like, what's the fellowship all about? And this is to hopefully give you some context as to what I'm going to talk about today. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, the MLH Fellowship is a program we started running here at Major League Hacking in 2020, and the idea is it's an internship alternative for folks who are looking to build their skills, take what they've learned in the classroom, and apply it to an actual job. The way we like to put it is we take your university experience and we turn it into the ability to actually make money with that experience. Let's teach you not just how to code, but also like what it means to code collaboratively, what it means to pair program, what it means to work cross-functionally with maintainers and partners and other stakeholders on these projects that you're building on. And then you can take that experience off to your job search or whatever you're looking to do next and say, I learned how to build this thing. I am now a more experienced developer than I was before. That is the heart and soul of what the MLH Fellowship strives to be. We've won awards for it. In the 2022 DevRel Awards, we were called the Best Developer Education Initiative. And both maintainers of projects, open source projects and projects in the industry, and the fellows themselves have had nothing but great things to say about their experience in the program. Some eagle-eyed person in the chat recognized Kunal. Yes, there he is, sort of hanging out in the corner over there. But he'll be there forever. There's Swift too. We've got a bunch of like secret cameos in this presentation so far. But yeah, so the idea here is that we're putting a product together that takes talented early career developers and not only gives them an opportunity to work really hard and learn a lot, but take what they learn in the fellowship and apply it to their job search or what they hope to achieve in the future. And one of the reasons I thought this would be an interesting conversation for right now is fellowship's been around for almost 3 years now. We'll have our 3-year anniversary this coming spring, and in that time, we have collected a lot of applications. We have read a lot of applications and had a lot of conversations with folks who are at roughly the same point in their career that you are right now. All of you watching this, I assume, or most of you, are early career developers who are looking to build your skills and ultimately get more out of your career in technology. And I get to sit on top of this giant pile of applications, and that gives me a really interesting insight into what are some commonalities in this community, what are some shared pain points, what are some shared takeaways that we can all learn from to help ourselves get better in this crazy world we call being tech professionals, right? And the other reason I think this is important, or that the fellowship might be able to provide some insights here, is that it has always been a selective program, just by the nature of how many seats we can physically support. Right, like we have had over, as we said, over 56,000 um, people apply to this program. We have only ever had just over 1,000 people actually enroll and get into the program. So we are running a selective program, and that means that much like applying for a job, the folks who apply to the fellowship are trying to get themselves, noticed in a crowded field, stand out in a crowded field. Um, and this has only become more relevant as time has gone on, right? It has never been easy, no matter what your family might think, or no matter what your friends might think, or no matter what society might think. It's not necessarily easy to work in tech or to get that tech job that you want. Tech companies are constant, technology is constantly changing, needs are constantly changing. How do you sort of keep yourself up to date on these things? And so here's a question. This pie chart that's up on the screen right now is it comes out of the most recent MLH census that we run. And in that census, we ask our community, how difficult is it to get a tech job or internship? And the choices run from extremely easy, like easiest thing in the world, all the way to extremely difficult. Wow, this is super hard. And with all these colors, it's a little bit difficult to read. So I've simplified it a bit. That blue slice up at the top is the percentage of your cohort that think it's easy to get a job in tech. Everyone else feels the way most of you do, I'm sure, which is this is not an easy thing to do, right? Like this is a very, very tricky thing. And that's true sort of this holds true regardless of experience level, regardless of what technology people are learning. This is not an easy thing to do. And the world that we're stepping into, as many of you I'm sure are aware, is not making it much easier for you all, right? I'm sure you've seen the headlines recently. Job offers are getting rescinded. Big tech is going into a hiring freeze, or what does that mean for me? Apple, Google, Meta, the companies are hitting the brakes. What am I going to do? And what this tells me is that there's a need in the community for some tips and tricks as to how to make your application stand out from the crowd. This is my clever picture to represent standing out from the crowd. It was very subtle. I'm sure you all needed it explained to you. um, but the idea here is that, folks who have applied to the MLH fellowship, a lot of people have done so. Only about 1 in, let's say, 50 has been successful. And so it seemed like I and my team were sitting on some data and sitting on some pattern recognition here that might help, because if folks can learn from what it takes to get noticed in the fellowship, maybe we can apply some of those learnings to, say, a job search and make yourself a more competitive job seeker in the future. So what does that mean? Well, I took a look at those 56,000 applications and all the folks who have been through the program in the last 3 years. Thank you, those of you who are complimenting my pictures. They only get better, trust me. But here we have sort of the first pillar, if you will, of what it takes to get noticed when it's crowded, and the chances of getting picked for any one opportunity are slim. How do you help yourself stand out? Well, one of the ways to do it is to look into specializing your skill set, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means in the coming slides. So before I get into the specifics, I want to share with you this essay. Some of you may have seen this before if you've been to some of my info sessions. But this is an essay that was written by one of our incoming applicants just about a year ago now. Um, and this person was really, really interested in being a fellow more broadly. But then they really wanted us to understand that, like, the reason they wanted to be a fellow was they were interested in our Web3 track very specifically. They're like, I'm interested in the fellowship in general, but my passion is for blockchain and for Web3 and for learning all of everything I can about that ecosystem. So this person applied, and very specifically applied to this to become a fellow for Solana, who's one of our partners. And the specifics of their project are less important than the fact that they, rather than just submitting something that they did in school or that was sort of vaguely interesting to them or that they had on their GitHub, they were very strategic and very specialized in the code sample that they sent in. And they said, you know what, I want to be a fellow. I specifically want to be a Solana fellow. This person was accepted into the fellowship. They were accepted as a Solana fellow. And I took a look. They are now working full time in Web3 in developer relations. So this person took their very specialized interest in blockchain and Solana in particular, and has successfully been able to translate that into fellowship experience that ultimately also became full-time work experience. And so, not everyone will share this exact interest or this exact area of specialization. But I think this really illustrates something that we look for in our talent screening for the fellowship, and then hiring managers are also looking for, which is, don't just, a generalist can be great, but if you can go deep on one or two things that really, really light you up, and we'll talk about curiosity in a little while, but if you can get curious on one or two things and really go deep on those things, you will become a standout in a smaller field. And that can be really, really helpful. So if you haven't yet figured out a specialization or something that you feel strongly about that you want to work on in the future, that is one direction you might want to go in to better showcase your skills. I'll give you another example of what this can look like. So here we have a chart that represents the percent of our applicants who are proficient in a given language, and the percent of projects that require that given language. So these are two very different languages. We've got JavaScript here and Rust. For our applicants, 82% of our applicants say they are somewhat or very proficient in JavaScript, right? Which makes sense. JavaScript is ubiquitous. It's all over the internet. It's all over front and back end development these days. Everybody knows JavaScript. Rust is a very different language, right? It's kind of up and coming. Most universities are not teaching it. And so the coverage that it has in our community is much, much less. Only 9% of our fellows coming in say that they are even slightly proficient in using the Rust programming language. But here's the trick. Everybody knows JavaScript, but not every open opportunity in the fellowship requires JavaScript. In fact, in the last year, only about 25-26% of our projects required someone who was really, really good at JavaScript. So if you are a JavaScript specialist, well, you're competing with 82% of the population for 26% of the available seats. But if you are Rust proficient, or if you're willing to put the time in and say, hey, you know what, I'm curious about this. Rust reminds me, like, I played around with it. This is really interesting. Then you are one of 9% of applicants shooting for 16% of the seats. And the math just looks totally different at that point, right? The number of opportunities, yet are there fewer seats for Rust than there are for JavaScript? Absolutely, right? 26% of projects for JavaScript. There are more JavaScript seats than there are Rust seats. But there are so many fewer candidates who know Rust that their odds of getting in project by project are much, much better. And it doesn't have to be Rust. If you look at Rust and you're like, ugh, this is not the kind of programming I want to do, there are other things, excuse me, sort of niche programming opportunities that open up all the time. We have, Web3 in general is a really good example. We've had projects in mobile development that are not terribly common, particularly like Swift development is not the easiest thing in the world, right? To find in our talent pool. So what I want you to take away from this is not everybody in the world needs to run out and learn Rust, though if you want to, by all means do so. The idea here is that the folks who chose to put their time into something a little bit specialized and a little bit sort of like off the beaten track have suddenly made themselves more interesting in the fellowship market than those who are just learning the things that everybody else is learning, right? So do you have to learn JavaScript? Yeah, probably you do. But it wouldn't hurt you to also specialize in a couple of other less well-known languages, because the odds will just be in your favor. I hope that all makes sense. We will have time for Q&A at the end of this, so please let me know if there's anything else I can do to clarify this stuff. But that's what I mean by specialization. Find something that lets you carve out a niche for yourself or a little corner in the market that you particularly are interested in. Get good at it, and that will open up opportunities for you. Along the same lines, we have this concept of getting curious about the things that you're learning and following that curiosity to its logical end. So what do I mean by that? Well, here's another pie chart to share with you. This is also from our community survey, and in this one, we ask our folks, "How did you learn to code? What was the primary way that you got skilled up?" And there's all kinds of categories here, right? Like there's the obvious ones, like, oh, I learned in school, I went to a boot camp, a friend or colleague taught me. But then what's really fascinating is the bigger slice here, the yellow slice, is actually self-directed learning. I worked on personal projects. I bought some books. I went to a hackathon and it forced me to get better at my skills, right? So what this is showcasing is that particularly in the tech industry, folks, there's never been more resources, there's never been more availability of resources to learn whatever it is you're interested in, whether that's front end or back end or a particular language or a particular framework. Like the resources are out there, and many of the people in your cohort, the folks who are members of MLH right now, are taking advantage of those tools. So you got to constantly be asking yourself, what is the next thing I want to get good at? What is the next thing I'm really super curious about? I got into tech in the first place because I'm curious and excited to learn new things. What is the next thing that I want to learn? So got to be asking yourself, what am I curious about, and what is the next thing that I want to learn? And then I found this really, really fascinating. So, applicants who reported trying something new in their code sample for the application process were 3 times more likely to be accepted to the program. What I mean by this is when we look at your application, when you apply to the fellowship, we are always looking at we're looking at the project that you submitted, what made you interested in it, what did you learn from that project? And here we see just a couple of examples of people who submitted code samples. This is all from code sample submission, where they explicitly said, in this project, I tried to learn something new. I particularly love this one in the middle here. This is my first try getting out of tutorial slash courses hell. I really didn't know how to do it, but I forced myself to learn it to get my page to look decent. And this is exactly what we want to see in the fellowship, is not just that you are able to execute, but that you are able to and excited to learn something new and have taught yourself something new. And when I ran the numbers on this, and I just did some like language processing on our code sample essays, I was like, how many of our folks say I use this code sample to learn something new? And it turns out that those folks were 3 times more likely to be accepted than folks who just submitted something that they did in school or submitted something that they already knew how to do well. So put yourself out there, lean into your curiosity, learn new things, and then tell people about what you're learning. It is way more likely to, it'll open doors for you that maybe you won't know exactly what that looks like. But it gets the attention of the folks who are making hiring decisions or making fellowship decisions, for instance. By the way, I'm seeing some questions on the on in the chat about sharing the slides. All of this will be first of all, this is going to get posted to YouTube for sure, and then second of all, I'll work with our Global Hack Week team to see if we can get the slides slides out to everyone who checked in for this event. So if you've already checked in, we'll do our best to actually send you a PDF of the slides. Not a terrible idea to take screenshots either, for those of you who are saying so in the chat. It's not the worst thing in the world, but we'll do our best to get a PDF out to everybody. I will take that as a good sign, though, that this is useful information. All right, and so we talked a little bit about specialization and going deep in the things that you're really excited about. We talked a little bit about curiosity, making sure that you're sort of like throwing your net wide and saying, what else is going on out there in the tech community that I can go deep on. The third piece is this idea of persistence. And I'll tell you, when I was putting these slides together, I was like, what's persistent? Well, a salmon swimming upstream is persistent. But then I realized I used a cat to represent specialization and a cat to represent curiosity. So if we want a persistent cat, I thought I'd put a GIF of a persistent cat on the slide as well, since, as I said at the very start of this presentation, crazy cat lady, you knew it was coming. But what do we mean by persistence? I want to share some information about our community with you. First thing I want to share is that there's this interesting thing happening. As I was doing research for this presentation, yes, is big tech freezing hiring? In some cases, yes. Are they slowing hiring? In some cases, yes. But then you can also find startups that are really interested in hiring all those people that Google and Meta suddenly aren't able to hire. Or, you've got a lot of tech companies who are still actively opening their doors to folks. Or, and this one might be my favorite, tech jobs grow despite layoffs, hiring freezes, and Elon Musk. So despite all of his best efforts, there are still jobs in the tech industry. And just because one company or one set of companies is not actively hiring right now, that does not mean there isn't something out there for you. And that first job that you get doesn't have to be your forever job, but it can be the thing that gets you the experience that you need to get to where you want to go. So I want to share some examples of how persistence plays out in the fellowship talent funnel. So that you can see how that could potentially apply to your job search or the next thing that you're trying to do. So this first one is 36%. I love this number. This number is so incredibly exciting to me because it just goes to show that persistence is key. So of all of our fellows who participated in the program in 2022, which is about 400 or 500 folks, I want to say, 36% of them were re-applicants, meaning they got into the program after having applied before and been rejected. And in fact, 20%, or one in every five participant, got accepted after having applied 3 or more times to the program. So that means somewhere between a third and 40% of our incoming fellows were people who had applied before, been rejected, and said, you know what, I'm going to try again. So if you've applied to the program before and you've gotten that email that says, we really encourage you to apply again, and you've like rolled your eyes and been like, ugh, like clearly they don't want me. Clearly this isn't good. Clearly I'm not good enough. So not true. This is such a great example of how persistence can pay off for folks. I love seeing folks reapply, and it really makes me so happy when someone who's applied a bunch of times, finally the magical alchemy of, we had the right project for them, they had the right availability, we had the right pod structure for them at the right meeting time, and it all just sort of comes together and they're able to come into the program. So please don't take one no or one not now as the final answer. Similarly to that, 27%, this one also sort of blew my mind. So going back to that survey that I've talked about, that MLH community survey, every year we ask our community members, have you applied to the fellowship? And some people say yes, and some people say no. And if folks say no, we ask them, why? What made you decide not to apply? The most common response was, oh, I didn't think my skills were ready. I didn't think I was going to be good enough to get into the program. Well, we've already spent some time talking about how you can help yourself stand out with with specialization or showcasing your unique curiosity. What I thought was so interesting about this number is I was like, "Oh, well, I wonder if that's just one particular kind of person. Like maybe people who say they've only just started to learn to code. They don't think their skills are ready. Or maybe it's just people who are underrepresented in tech and they're having imposter syndrome, and they don't think their skills are ready. No, what's fascinating about this number is that everyone, no matter how I slice the data, I cut it by gender, I cut it by nation of origin, I cut it by years of experience, every single way I cut this number, just about 25 to 30% of the population take themselves right out of the process because they just assume they're not ready for it. And that like it as someone who runs a program like this, that makes me feel so like sad a little bit, because if you don't apply, you'll never know if you were ready, right? You'll never ever know if you were good enough. And I was talking to a group of young developers of underrepresented genders back in early December, I want to say. And they said, what's the single biggest thing that we can do to make ourselves stronger applicants? And the number one thing was, I was like, don't wait to shoot for opportunities. Yes, you are nervous and you're like, I don't know, this doesn't this I don't feel ready, or this or that. So does literally everybody else. Look around you, look at the people in the chat with you. 1 in 3 people in this community don't think they're ready, and yet here we are putting thousands of people through the program, seeing thousands of hackers get jobs, thousands of hackers build wonderful projects every year. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Um, and just to underline that a little bit, of our fellows who make it into the program, so people who have been admitted into the program, so these are the most successful people in the entire process. 62% of them have never made an open source contribution before applying. Their first ever contribution was actually in the program. So I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but the thing I most want you to take away, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, is that so much of success is just showing up. Right? So much of success is just giving yourself the opportunity to be noticed, right? And yes, to be help yourself stand out a little bit more with a specialization or with a special curiosity or what have you. But so much of what ultimately leads to success is just giving yourself the opportunity to succeed, right? And I recognize that I say that as someone who's been in the industry for a very long time, and it's maybe easy for me to say, but it all sort of starts with some of these tips. It's like help yourself be easy to select by making yourself easy to spot. Specialize in something that folks are going to be looking for, and put your hand up for opportunities even when you think you're not ready, because you'd be shocked at how much is out there for someone even at the level that you are at today. So that's what I have for you all. Thank you so much for the lively chat going on and lots of reactions. As I said, I will do my very best to get slides out to folks. This also has been recorded and will go up on YouTube. And you will absolutely 100% get a recording of it. What questions do folks have about anything that I've covered? I really appreciate all the wonderful comments in the chat. If you ever want to, chat more about the fellowship, we didn't run an info session this month, but we will run one next month and in future months in the spring. Applications, I have to say this because I'm the head of the fellowship, right? Applications for the fellowship for the summer are open right now. So if you're one of those folks who wanted to apply, but then you thought maybe you weren't ready, now is maybe the right time to give it a try for the summer. But yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. I'll give you guys another couple of minutes to see if you have any questions. Thank you, by the way, to those of you who are saying it was a fun presentation. As with many things, the only way to get good at presenting is to do it, even when you're not ready for it. I started becoming a presenter way back at the beginning of my career by teaching and tutoring like test prep classes. And I was not very good at it at first. And I had to practice and practice and practice before I got good. But somebody gave me a chance, right? And that's how I was able to build my skill set. Let's see. So we've got some questions. This is probably a really good question. What if our specialization isn't something that's really popular? How do we stand out there? I think that's a really, really good question. Of course, it'll depend on the thing that you're interested in. But I always believe that, even if something is wildly popular, there's always a way to take your individual spin on it, right? So maybe I'll use an example from pop culture because it's easy, right? um I would say, I'm a big Star Wars fan. And lots of Star Wars is very popular, right? Everybody loves Star Wars. But if I wanted to get involved in the fan community of Star Wars, I would be thinking to myself, okay, I love this community. I love what it does. I'm really into it. But like, what can I do uniquely that I think people would be interested in? And maybe I would want to do some cosplay, or maybe I would want to, yeah, get into reading the novels or writing stories in that universe, because that's how that's a strength of mine that I can then bring into that community, right? So to think about it in terms of technical skills, if you are specialized in, say, Python, for instance, your university taught in Python, you've done a lot of building in Python, you're like, I'm really, really good at this, then I would say, all right, are you more interested in like the data analysis side of Python, or the straightforward software engineering side of Python? Because I'll tell you, we get a lot of interest in both sides. And I'm actually filling a bunch of projects right now for folks who are specifically looking for not just Python skills, but folks who are really good at the like data analysis side of Python. So have you used pandas? Have you used NumPy? Have you used all of the various sort of artificial intelligence tools that are attached to that tech stack? So I would say, if you have something broad that you're interested in, try to find a lane within it that uniquely speaks to your skill set and uniquely speaks to what you're interested in. And I think something that's hard about that sometimes is um, it can sort of feel like you're closing doors, like, oh well, if I get really deep into the data side of Python, then what happens to my skill set for the rest of it? And I would say, there's more opportunity out there than you might think. And just because you're specialized in one thing right now doesn't mean you can't change in the future, right? Like I started my career as a teacher. Now I'm running a fellowship program. There's sort of a specialization that you can choose for right now to put yourself in a strong position, um, that you can always switch it up. You can always switch it up. Let's see. As I've been talking, we've gotten a couple of more questions. Um, can we see what projects fellows work on ahead of time? One really great way to do that is to take a look at our YouTube channel. We have recordings of fellows talking about their projects from the program. We've had folks in like a fellowship graduation, for instance, talk a little bit about the projects that they're working on. We don't always know what projects are going to be available for any particular semester in advance. But if you are selected for a project, we can usually let you know which ones uh, are a good fit for your skill set. And then we have a really good question here, which is, if you're looking to get into the fellowship, what kinds of projects would you recommend building? We actually have an entire video of that up on our YouTube channel. It's our most recent info session. It's a fellowship info session that we ran, and we specifically spent a good 15 to 20 minutes talking about what makes for a strong code sample, what kind of code we're looking for, how to make your code sample stand out. So if you're looking for some guidance on that, we have some content for you to check out. It's really, really valuable. I actually ended up co-presenting with one of my technical interviewers, someone who's been through the program before, and he gave just a ton of tips and tricks on how to to make your code sample just that much more ready for the fellowship program itself. Mhm. All right, here's another question. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Does your resume matter to be an MLH fellow? The answer is not really, right? It only matters in as much as we want to see what you are interested in. And so if your resume showcases that you are interested in a particular thing, that helps us to make a match for you. I'll give you an example. We had a fellow, this I want to say it was this summer, who was interested in getting into technology, but she had originally started her education in the sciences. She was like a biotechnology major or a biochem major or something like that. And so she shared her resume with us, and she was like, "Hey, I have this love for science and particularly for the health sciences, but I'm trying to break into technology." And she put that up on her resume, and because of that, she ended up being matched to a project from our partner, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, who were specifically looking for someone who had programming experience, but who also had an interest in and a passion for the health sciences. And so her resume absolutely helped us understand what is she passionate about. What might she be a good fit at, and how can we take her technical skills and her non-technical passions and connect that into the project that we matched her to. But we are not looking, for instance, for, say, big logos on your resume, or have you already interned at such and such company. No, we are overall, the way I would put it is we are looking to understand the story of who you are as a developer and what sort of lights you up and gets you excited. And so your resume is one tool for us to help understand who you are and what gets you excited. I hope that helps. All right. I'm seeing a bunch of like just logistical questions about the program itself. I would encourage you to check out the website. Most of that is answered in the FAQ, or you're always welcome to shoot an email to fellowship@mlh.io if any of your questions are not answered on the website. All right. Well, I am looking. The last question that I will take here is: Are applications open now for summer APAC candidates? Yes, absolutely. Summer is wide open at the moment. We expect our summer semester to have a relatively large number of seats. So last summer we hosted about 220 fellows. This summer, I'm hopeful. We don't know for sure yet, but I'm hopeful we will be able to support a class of about 250 fellows. So wherever you are in the world and whatever your particular specialization is, I am hoping we will have a wide variety of seats to share with everyone, and to give you lots of opportunities to learn with us. All right, friends. Well, I think I covered most of the questions in the chat. Thank you all so much for your asks and for your attention. This was a lot of fun to put together. I hope it was helpful to all of you. Again, if you take nothing else away from this entire presentation, it's that if you have imposter syndrome or you're nervous about trying something, know that probably 30 to 40% of the people around you also feel that way, and that it is the one who will take a chance and take a risk that will likely get chosen. So work on your skill sets, get yourself nice and well rounded, and I hope to see your applications for the fellowship in the future. Enjoy Global Hack Week, everyone.